Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today, we're chatting with Michelle Mansueto, a health coach. And here's what we talk about in this episode. As a relative newcomer to the health coaching space, Michelle found an opportunity to bring her acupuncture and health coaching practice into a pretty large national corporate setting. She had an opening, but didn't know what to do to get her foot in the door. This didn't stop her. Michelle reached out to her peers and some leaders in the space, including Laura and me, to get some support and assistance in pulling together what amounted to a pitch deck to describe to this organization how her involvement in their corporate health measures would benefit them. Great news, she got the gig. We know a lot of coaches have a desire to work in corporate wellness space, so this will be of interest to you, but also of interest to any health, fitness, or nutrition coach who's dreaming of working in collaboration with any kind of organization at all. You can do it. You just got to take the bull by the horns like Michelle did. We'd love to have you screenshot your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. And don't forget, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes of Health Coach Radio can be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. Our show is proudly brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute, now an accredited educational provider with the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. This means that our graduates can become eligible to sit for the NBHWC credentialing exam to become a board-certified health and wellness coach. Check out primalhealthcoach.com/level2 to learn about our new advanced coaching course taught by me that will nudge you out of your comfort zone, launch you into coaching mastery, and qualify you to sit for the board certification exam. Laura will share a little bit more about what we teach at the end of today's episode. In the meantime, let's get on with the show. Please enjoy our conversation with practicing health coach Michelle Mansueto. Welcome to the show, Michelle. How are you?
Doing quite fine. How are you guys?
Doing good. We're pretty pumped, though, to talk to you because you're a practicing health coach. And that's kind of, I think, the spirit behind why we started Health Coach Radio. But a lot of times practicing health coaches are a little shy to come and talk to us. But we love chatting with folks who are actually practicing health coaching because, man, it's so interesting. It's always so interesting to me to hear how different health coaches practice, and every single one of us is doing it in a completely different way. So anyway, long story short, I'm delighted to be here with you and hear your story. And that's actually where we'd love to start. If you don't mind kind of introducing yourself to our listeners, give us your 3 to 5 minute backstory on what brought you here today.
Well, okay, so I should start with, I'm an acupuncturist. I sort of stumbled into that career as well. It was always around, how do I fix my children's health? How do I fix my family's health? And it was also how do I fix my own health? Because I kind of came up a bit of a sickly kid. And I remember doing like a vegan project in high school and looking at natural foods and natural food remedies. So it was just, I was sick all the time. My brothers and sisters were sick, and we were eating like loads of pasta and junk and Shasta Cola with like health warnings on the back. So then by the time I got to college, I had started out with physical therapy in mind, and I ended up with a biology degree. And while I was on that journey, I was doing volunteer projects, and I picked up Lyme disease while I was volunteering in Tennessee. So once again, I ended up really just sick.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, I'm going to try this vegetarian thing for a while. And I see your eyebrows. It did about as well as you think it did. I had also conceived our first child right about that time, near the end of that, and I was eating lots of soy, and I was doing a lot of vegetables, but there was a lot of soy in there and not nearly enough protein. So I was pretty anemic with that pregnancy, and I didn't feel well. So I started adding protein back in, and then my daughter came with her own special variety of health challenges, and she was failing to thrive. We had a hard time getting her to crack 17 pounds, and she was like 16, 18 months.
Wow.
So it's pretty scrawny. But her development was fine. She had this horrible bloat digestion thing going on. So they tested her for cystic fibrosis and for celiac. Thankfully, neither one of those things came back. But I was the bread queen, and I thought I was doing a great thing, you know, making homemade bread and muffins. And so with her, it was easy enough fix to just kind of go gluten-free and make sure that she ate well. And a lot of her things kind of sorted out after that. She still had lung issues. They cleared up a little later on. And on to baby number 2, where I'm pretty thin, so most people wouldn't think that there would be any problem, but I had a nice case of gestational diabetes going on. Oh. And my sister was also on her own food journey at that time, because her child broke both long bones before the age of 1. So they tested for osteogenesis imperfecta. They did genetic testing, and he had this horrible reflux. And so she found the specific carbohydrate diet people and Weston A. Price, and his situation was corrected with pulling him off of grains. So we both sort of accidentally finding this path. And after I went to her crying because I had flunked my sugar test with flying colors, she sent me Well Fed by Melissa. Yeah, it's that was a lifesaver. So I ended up having a mostly keto pregnancy. I couldn't eat a whole sweet potato without setting my sugar off. And my midwife had me testing my sugar upon waking, testing after each meal. And, you know, within 2 to 3 weeks of doing that, you kind of figure out what's setting you off and what's not. So it ended up being mostly a keto pregnancy, and I felt really good. So I was seeing clients, and it's funny about that whole thing you get where you end up, it's kind of a mirror of you, what's coming in the door and what you have going on. So I had a few pregnant women at the time. One of them had just lost her baby, 9 months in the NICU, and did not go home as complications from gestational diabetes. Oh. So I knew when I saw her, I'm like, okay, this is indeed going to be extreme compliance, and there's really good reasons for it. So I started to use what I was learning, which I was like sending people to Mark's Daily Apple. I didn't have a name for it. There wasn't a program yet. And I started relentlessly sending people to just go visit Mark's Daily Apple. Or I think Whole30 was coming out with their thing at that time, and getting at least a tract where you could put people on it. And then their numbers and their conditions were getting better. It's like, oh, autoimmune conditions, great. We have a little bit of an answer for this. I mean, it's not a perfect answer, but it was certainly better than what they had available. And it was funny because they'd say, "You mean that paleo diet?"
Yeah, I know.
They didn't know what to call it, and I was on the. I had kind of been tinkering with the website for a while, and I saw the initial Primal Health Coach thing go through. And I missed that first wave where it was like ridiculously priced and you got grandfathered in. I think by the time I knew I wanted to do it, I had just opened up my own acupuncture clinic. And when you start anything, it's kind of slow. So you have some downtime, and you don't want to drive yourself crazy with staring
Right.
at walls.
Right.
I'm like, oh, well, there's this program. It's all streamlined. I'm using it anyway. It makes it really easy to put things in front of people that have already been done for you. Um, and they're like designed well, it's streamlined. It's like, okay, let me just do this. At the time I had no intention of really being a health coach or doing health coaching. I was sort of just wrapping it into my practice. Um, so I piddled around with the course, and it took me forever because at first there weren't deadlines or guided modules. So I think there was like this 2-year completion thing. Yes, I let it ride to
Same.
almost the last month to get it done. Um, and even then, still didn't know really what to do with it. I was happy I had the information. I could finally direct people. But it was that first master class that I went to that shifted the gears for me. And it was more around finding how I was going to implement it, why even I would implement it. And at the time, I was coming up into this really neat project because I'd been going to health fairs and kind of been getting out in the community anyway, trying to promote acupuncture, good health. And I started treating this nurse that worked for the Department of Justice. And she invited me into a DOJ health fair. And then I got invited to start an employee wellness program,
Awesome.
which, yeah, it was really, really neat until the little minnow got noticed in the big Shark Tank, because I didn't know that they were just like really excited to have somebody there, treating their employees. And um, there was somebody in charge that was getting ready to retire. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, the employees are happy. And then there was a new person that came in, and there was a new director. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, you have this hippie that's coming in and treating your employees with acupuncture and cupping, and she's saying all sorts of things about food. And then that's when it became like it needed to be approved. It was like, okay, we have this neat idea, but how do we get it to where it's approved and everybody is happy with it? And it was I think it was at the second, it was at this, no, it was the first master class that I did, because I ended up doing 2. And you guys were helping. You have a marketing packet that's really nice that you had put out there. And I ended up using that as the format. And I believe, Erin, you were nice enough to let me send you what I had, and you went over my materials and sent it back. And I couldn't have imagined better support in getting this step done, because it was like, oh, you said corporate wellness, and now I have this chance to do corporate wellness. But I'm an acupuncturist with like 0 business training. So how am I going to get this done? And this packet ended up being this packet, and then the nurse's persistence in wanting her employees to have something that would help them get on track, it ended up getting the program approved, and it went like all the way up to the top. So that it was no longer this weird thing of like, hey, it's Monday, is the acupuncturist there? Then it was like, it's Monday, so this is your employee wellness program, go downstairs and see her. So that ended up being a great project. And having marketing materials ready to go, even if you don't think you're going to use them, or if you think it feels like it's in the ethers, have it together, have your presentation together. Because by the time this packet was due, I had thankfully already been working on it with you, because I didn't know that I was going to get like run. I didn't know I was going to get run through the mill and like have to go through this very, very legal procedure. But thankfully the packet was already done and journal articles to support and the nurse advocating for her employees. Because I had to work a double the night that that packet was due, and it was due prompt the next morning. And even at midnight, I was kind of skimming through, making sure I had everything. And then it was just sort of like crossing my fingers to get it approved. Mm-hmm. And it did. It went. Yeah. But it would have gone nowhere if I didn't have that packet.
Yeah, that's right. I do want to pause for just a minute because this is great. I know you have a lot more to tell us, Michelle, but I just want to kind of give our listeners the lay of the land here. So Michelle graduated from the school that Laura and I work for. And if you listen to this podcast, you know that Laura and I work for a specific school. We're also here to raise the profile of health coaching in general, but we do work for a specific school. Michelle has graduated from our school. So the master class that Michelle talks about is this live event we would host once a year, back when we could do live events. Maybe we could do them again someday. And it's a pretty cool business sort of coaching deep dive. And then the packet that you put together, Michelle, we have some done for you marketing materials that we offer to our students, and you really took it in and tweaked it for your audience, which is what we encourage. And what I think is really interesting about your story, though, Michelle, that I wanted to just circle back on, is anybody who's interested in going to corporate wellness, which is a lot of people. And I think that I shared this with you when I was going over your pitch. It really is a pitch. You have to go in there, whether it's the DOJ or like Acme Printer Supplies or whatever company it is. You've got to make it about the benefit to the company. We can't just go in there and talk about us, talk about health. We have to talk about how this is going to impact the company, the employees. You want to go in there with like actual data. So that's really what we worked on for your packet to submit to the DOJ.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to make sure that other people look at it and you have an incredible support system. I was lucky enough that the nurse really benefited from acupuncture, but more so she took the food and she ran with it, and she felt so much better when she was on a Primal diet. Go figure. And I had some help from a couple of other people that I had been treating previously there, and like I have zero business training, so I lucked out that somebody that had an MBA was looking at it and helping me tweak things. So like, find people in your community that have this other training and learn.
Furthermore,
like, get as much as you can.
Furthermore, to your credit, Michelle, you asked people to help you. Like if you don't ask, you're not going to get the help. So that's just an acknowledgement to you for doing that.
Yeah. You know, what I've kind of taken away from your story so far, to kind of drill this down for people listening who are, I know their minds are immediately going to, well, I'm not an acupuncturist, so, or, well, I'm not a this, so I can't be successful, right? The acupuncture part is just a part of the story. But what I hear was you have a personal story. You have a very deeply rooted why, because what I heard about your past story is you were always sick. And you were always sick until, right? Dun, 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 insert this event, a piece of knowledge, an aha moment that finally transitioned things for you, that then turns you into this, how can I share this with others? Everybody listening to this likely has a very similar story. Not that they're an acupuncturist or maybe they didn't suffer from the things you suffered from, but this is, when we think about kind of getting started in this, and when you think about, well, what's going to prompt somebody to even hire me or work with me, is they need to be able to connect to you and your story and know that you're authentic and where your personal motivation comes from. Then I also heard that before you were ever even certified as a health coach, you were embodying a health coach. You were acting like it. You just went out and did it because you knew you could help people. You did what health coaches always do really well, which is share resources. You sent them to MDA. You sent them to Whole30. You did what you could with the resources you had at your disposal. And guess what that does? It gives you confidence. It gives you experience, and it helps you define really what your next step should be.
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know these things until you kind of get down that path. The other thing I heard that you have is you took advantage, again, of the resources available to you, starting with our own marketing materials. And just, to be fair, our marketing materials are relatively generic, but they're designed to be that way so that you can then take them and make them your own. There's no reason why you have to start from complete scratch if you've got resources and support behind you that you can build on. And then the last piece of this, and this is really important, is you have an advocate. This nurse, she's your advocate, right? She's not a mentor. She's not someone who's teaching you. She's someone who believes in you. And all the steps that you took to get up to that is what led you to being able to build a relationship with this advocate, who at the end of the day is probably really the turning point to get you into the DOJ to begin with and really make this big. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the second masterclass where I think it was the Keto Gains guys.
Oh yeah. The one we had in Austin.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And there were a few lines that I took from that. And one of them was like, it was funny. I think he said, how do you not Peter affect yourself out? And I felt like for corporate wellness, this was a monster for me. It wasn't like I was just going into like an acupuncture studio like mine, like some small mom and pop shop. It was this big DOJ building and with notorious skeptics. Like if you're going to sharpen your skills anywhere, they're the most skeptical people on the planet. So it felt like, all right, make it or break it. And every day was a learning experience. He had brought out that you also need to, how you define success will become different as you kind of go through some of these challenges. It was definitely a learning process, and it still is, because everything was going quite swimmingly until COVID. And I always felt like I'm a vendor there, and I always felt like I'm kind of hanging by a thread. That's how vendors are. Mm-hmm. And one day it was just, all right, no more visitors allowed in the building because there's spread. So that was it. It's on hold for now. But what it made me do after I started there is there was a building right next door where I knew people that worked, and I got invited to a health fair there. So after numbers calm down and things kind of sort themselves out, I have things set up to, they at least know me. Mm-hmm. They know me, and I can kind of get back in with the swing of things, and start up with health fairs again. And hopefully by then I will have learned more, picked up more experience, and have more resources available and more contacts to offer a better program.
Yeah.
So that's what's in the future.
I love it. So one thing you just said a second ago, I want to circle back on. You said, and I think you said you were quoting Tyler and Luis, but there's something to the effect of how you define success it shifts and changes as you go. Mm-hmm. Can you give us some examples, like what in the early days, what did success look like for you? Just for our listeners, like what does that mean?
Oh, okay. Well, there's more personal rooted stuff in there, so I'll just let it fly.
Let her rip.
So Primal, the health coaching material, it actually helped normalize what I do, because acupuncture is still looked at. I know many more people have tried it, but it's a strange thing. It's a strange item. And the way that we speak about it in school, it doesn't translate over well to the Western mindset. There's all this stuff about chi, body fluids, yin, yang, stuff that just, it doesn't make sense in our Western talk. Mm-hmm. So the health coaching helped give me a way to talk about food that was not related to Chinese medicine, where I could still steer it with Chinese medicine, mm-hmm. and have something valid that they could hear. Because the other thing is, you have to be able to say something that they can hear and that will make sense to them. So when I started out as an acupuncturist, the language was very different. It was all I knew was TCM talk, and that didn't make sense to anybody. And it was so foreign to what I was doing personally, because so I should say that I am now divorced. I was in a marriage to a medical sales rep.
Wow.
And in order to make that happen, there's a lot of entertaining with doctors. There's a lot of like, you're mixed in with a total Western mindset. And at one point in my relationship, because it was something that was uncomfortable for my then husband, was there was like a gag rule on me. I couldn't talk about my career because he was afraid that it might harm his accounts. Like, what if they looked at his very strange acupuncturist wife and didn't know what to do with this? So there were many years where I sat at the table with people and they didn't even know I had an outside career. It was like, oh, okay. So learning to speak, it helped then to where I could begin to talk about it at the table. But I had also started making steps to my marriage was not healthy. So I started making steps to leave that. And my vision of success at that point was, I had been kind of a stay-at-home mom for a while. So it was just like, all right, how do I find my feet? How do I get on my feet and do something for myself so that I can have my independence? And that's what opening my first clinic, it started to give me the hope that I could do that for myself. And then when I roped in the health coaching language, it was like, oh, this makes this easier. So that's where it's at. And I've since I moved from my first clinic spot. I was leasing space from a chiropractor. That's the other thing, developing lots of relationships and taking in mentoring. And her chiropractic office was amazing and slammed busy all the time. And she was also like meticulous. So I learned from her like the the value of when you go in there and you look at the floor and you think, okay, I could safely lick this floor. Like that's how organized and clean and meticulous she was. So I was like, when I open my space, I want it to be like this. And come COVID, I'm grateful that it is. It's like I had a period where I had to shut down for those 2 months because nobody was sure of anything. And I certainly didn't want to be the source of spread. But then when they said, all right, well, you can safely open back up, but at a different percentage, I'm about half pace now and able to keep things hopefully safely distanced and such. But having my space and having it be the way that I wanted was part of my vision of success.
Yeah.
You know, I love that you said that taking on this health coaching role taught you how to speak and that you can communicate, because that's what health coaching is all about. There's this misconception that, in fact, I had a conversation earlier today with a gentleman who's interested in enrolling and he's all worried about being sued. And I'm like, well, what are you concerned about being sued over? Well, what if I hurt somebody? How do you anticipate hurting somebody? Well, what if I put them on the wrong diet? That's where the misconception lies. It's not your role as a health coach to put somebody on a diet and tell them that they have to eat certain things or not eat certain things in order to, it's about communicating. It's about educating. It's about empowerment. It's about resources. I did a podcast interview with my aunt she has a life coaching business and she just wanted to interview me for her audience. And we were talking about the power of resources. That the vast majority of people who fail is because they lack resources. And those that are successful is because they either have access to them, go looking for them, somebody finds them, but it's environment and resources that make this whole thing work. And at the end of the day, as health coaches, we're communicators. And I love that was what helped you connect those two worlds. That health coaching helped you connect those two things to help you speak a language that made sense to your end client. Because health coaches, not just acupuncturists, health coaches have this problem when we start talking in industry speak, right? When we start using terms like glycolytic or systemic inflammation, people are like, I feel like I should know what that means. So I'm going to pretend like I do. And I'm going to nod at you and be like, oh yeah, I totally get it. They don't get it. They don't get it, right? So we've got to use coaching language, right? And we've got to learn to communicate and be authentic. So I love that.
It's so important to be able to, because no, you're not putting them on a diet. You're doing minor lifestyle adjustments in a language they can hear and encouraging them to do it. Because like the internet is there. They know it's not good for them. Yes, there's mass confusion around eggs, but it's eventually something they can figure out if it works for them or not. It's just like, what are these things that you're doing every single day that are helping you to be in this pickle that we could change one by one if need be? And like, I get a few that come in and overhaul everything overnight, but they're rare.
Yes.
And and each person you learn from. It's like what works for one might not exactly work for the other, and you have to continuously tweak it. But if you can just get them to hear it and then respond, you can get them on the path.
Yeah. So you're looking for these tiny aha moments. Like that's what really excites the client.
Right.
Not these giant overhauls that are kind of overwhelming. You talked about eggs. For me, it's dairy. I remember when I first got started, I was like, everybody's off dairy. Nobody gets to eat dairy. And then after a while, it was like, I've had enough clients now that, first of all, can't live without it. So it's like, okay, I mean, secondly, don't seem to have really bad outcomes. And then thirdly, the research is kind of always changing. So there's really a nimbleness, like truly, I've said this before, but the client creates the program half the time. We're facilitating it, but the client is really showing up with what they need. And our job is to meet them where they're at, which is probably the most often used phrase in the history of health coaching, but truly we're co-creating programs with our clients. So I love that you've had that. You've had a really interesting, I just feel like, Michelle, you had a really interesting, like you're really able to articulate the journey of health coaching so greatly. I even loved when I asked you the question about like how defining success has shifted for you. So it started from just having a voice at the table, at these dinner parties to, having the strength to maybe leave a relationship that's not even serving you and envisioning what, your future could look like. Because I think a lot of times when somebody gets started in entrepreneurship in any category, like I'm going to start a business, that we have this tendency, good, bad, or indifferent, to really blue sky, like, and someday I'll have a whole fleet of flower shops or whatever it is, right? But we do is we just gloss over the tiny granular victories at the beginning. Like suddenly I could talk at these dinner parties. And then I had a sense of like the strength of my feet were under me. So I could make moves out of this relationship that wasn't serving me. And then now I have a clinic with a really clean floor and like little things like this that are successes, but so many people overlook them.
Right.
It's the small stuff. I mean, it builds into the big stuff. So for like the man that's worried about being sued, legality, you're always worried about it when you practice, but it's like, once again, find some resources. I have wonderful functional medicine practitioners now that I know and I work with, and if it feels like it's out of my scope or there's something strange, it's like, hey, let's just text this doctor and see if we can get you an appointment, because I know that they are also completely in line with this, like this way of eating. And if there's something going on that needs to be further tweaked, they're my resource.
Right.
But likewise for them also, they're super busy. They're booked like 2 months out. And they also know that there are some of their, like, I call them like my trouble ducklings, some of them that have to be watched a little more. So she will often send me people from her practice that just, they need a little more attention throughout the month than just seeing her for quarterly blood work. So that's the relationships matter. And there are a lot of chiropractors out there that are super busy and don't have the time to sit there and talk about food with their people. There's functional medicine practitioners that are booked up and don't have the time to go through it weekly. So go meet your people.
Right.
Get out there, drop some healthy snacks off, and go meet your front desk people until they let you meet their doctor.
I love that. It's so interesting because before we press record on this podcast, I'm just going to kind of like throw you under the bus for a second, Michelle. You were like, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm such an introvert. But you're knocking on doors and bringing healthy treats to front desk receptionists at functional medicine clinics. Like, I mean, guys,
yeah,
go do that. Go talk to people, right? Like,
oh yeah, and that's painful. It was painful. It was painful, and it was well out of my comfort zone. And so I even developed a small method for doing this, because you're going to have screw ups and lots of mistakes, and you're going to feel like sometimes downright humiliated when you leave the door, and you're just like, oh, that was awful. So start far enough out of town. Go get your practice like far enough out of town that you're never going to run into these people. They'll probably never even think of you again, but then it gives you some practice. And oddly enough, it may end up being some of the people that end up referring to you, which is the weird part.
So you know what I call that? You know, I came from the finance world. I call that mitigation of risk, right? You know, you're taking some sort of risk. What can you do to help mitigate the impact of any perceived risk, right? This is how, like, from my finance days, people that invest, and this is the way we view things, right? You offset risk. That is one way of doing that, as far as mitigating the risk of embarrassing yourself or giving, like, cutting your teeth in an area where if things go wrong, it's not going to matter as much. But chances are, the odds are in your favor that it's going to go just great. Right. The same thing holds true for folks. Again, I hear this as the admissions director, this fear of leaving one career for another and the amount of risk that goes into that. And my first kind of, I don't know, I guess question that I might ask is, well, kind of what's your timeline here? You know, what are you really thinking about? Because there's absolutely no pressure for you to graduate from a school in 5 months, right? You can get through our program in 5 months. Average is longer. Your story is very common, right? Average is 6 to 8 probably, right? But you're not going to just up and leave your career the next day. You've got a step-by-step process. You just illustrated yours. The real risk will eventually come down to a period in time when you're as busy as you want to be on both ends of the spectrum. And now doing both is no longer sustainable and you have to make a choice. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's a risk, but your risk has just gotten cut in half than what it once was had you decided to just graduate and jump ship.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that you brought that up, Laura, because I just hosted a webinar last night, because we also host these webinars within our school. And one of the questions that came in from this fella who's in chapter 3, he's like, okay, how do I leap into health coaching? And I was like, don't leap, literally, like tiptoe, like because he's like, I've got this great job. I have to pay the mortgage. I have a family. It feels irresponsible to leave my job to go try and do this. It's like, yeah,
feels irresponsible because it is. Don't do that.
Yeah.
No, it takes a lot of time, creativity. I had a lot of lumps and bumps on the way, but I think the activity is just important. Who is it? Was it PJ? Who was the one that was like, just get stuff live?
Oh, that's Ryan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That was right. And it's kind of like just start baby steps, because it'll eventually build on its own. And I am kind of at that point now where I'm just beginning to look at scaling, because I inherited a practice from my friend during COVID, and right now I'm working 13 on, 1 off, and I know that is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so the other thing about success in my own little clinic, I'm also happy that I have a spot for my son, because during COVID everybody's homeschooling, and he's homeschooling now, so he's homeschooling while I'm working, and that felt nice that I could bring him to work and not get canned. So these small bits that you end up, because you can tailor it for your life. It takes time, but you can tailor it for your existence and make it work. And where I'm at with the straddle, it's kind of funny because I ended up, you have a new student in your Primal Health Coaching Institute. It's my boss down in Hallandale.
Oh, that's
Because
awesome.
she likes the material. And like, no, you have to just do this, because eventually I'm going to have to peel out of, I will have to refocus back on my clinic and plantation. And I do have the commitment, though, to help build this program down here in Hallandale. And part of that was introducing her to your program, so that there's a start point when you enter this fitness center in Hallandale. It's like, when you come in, you meet this person, you're going to do your body metrics, and then you can decide which way you want to take your program, but at least you know where you're at. And they even have their cafe down here, they have food options, they have catering. It's like this amazing little oasis in Hallandale, where you just have to walk through the door.
Love this. I love this story. It's so good because, you know, we talk about, like, I always think back to the early days of starting my practice, and I remember vividly what it was like in those days, what a drag it felt like. And it felt like I was pushing this giant boulder up a very steep hill and it was barely moving. But now I look back at those days so fondly and so grateful that I went through that journey. So I'm really excited that you said the words everyone wants to hear. Now I'm looking at scaling. Tell us how long it's been that you've been at this, where scaling is now a reality for you to be looking at.
Oh, okay. So from where I started, I was 3 years in my first acupuncture clinic. I am now almost 2 years into my own clinic in plantation. And between wanting the corporate wellness and COVID or not COVID, like, it's good that the gears had to shift anyway. It's been 5 years, and there was this 3 year mark that Laura was talking about, that it is indeed around 3 years where it started to gel. And now I can begin to see that, all right, I need more foundation laid in order to scale. And so I'm taking those steps, and that in itself is another learning process. It's like, all right, well, how is that going to work for me? And I hate social media. So that's something I'm looking at, and I've been up to this point okay without it. Like, clearly I got opportunities by being out and about. But with COVID, it's like, all right, now I need to get savvy with it, and I'm not. So I finally hired somebody on to handle my Instagram. It's like, I have this itty bitty little following right now, but it's beginning to grow, and I can see what. So we speak every other week or weekly, and I send her information, and she's really good at translating out, and certainly better at making the posts than I felt like I was. So it's also figuring out, you guys went through figuring out the jobs that you like to do and want to do, and social media was just not one of them for me. So I'm really excited that I got to hire somebody to do that, and I'm excited that in Hallandale they have a really nice marketing team that puts together their posts. So I've kind of just linked in with them. So I think I want to be encouragement for people that are like, I hate social media. It's like, it's okay. You don't have to like it. You just have to make enough steps to get along the way to where you can find somebody that does.
Absolutely.
At the beginning, you have to do all the jobs, even the ones you hate. That's just a reality. But then eventually you can start peeling away the things you really.
I'll gladly do the laundry and take the trash out. I don't want to do.
No, I mean, I there's something else you said too. So if you think about something you said about how you can make this fit the life you want to live. We talked about that at the masterclass too. Sometimes is really like, and I get this question on the phone with people is, you know, what is it like to be a health coach? What's a day in the life of a health coach like? And there is no one answer for that. And my question back to them is, what do you want it to be like? You know, I mean, when I went down my path, that was a question that my husband and I asked ourselves before I was going to actually leave and jump ship from that other career. Why am I doing this? right? What do I want my life to be like? What do we want our life to be like? How much money do we really need to make? This is the big question. So, how much money do you really need to make in order to accomplish that lifestyle? And then you can sort of back into reverse engineering all of that. So, some people get there because I have seen people start businesses without any kind of real vision as to what they want. And then the next thing you know, they just end up with a job, like another job that they hate. The business is running them rather than the other way around, you know? But then I also love kind of what you said about being able to find the right resource to get rid of the things that you don't want to do, because clearly spending a bunch of time on social media was not a part of that vision for you.
No.
No. Yeah. And so, now you're in a position where you can afford to pay someone a few bucks to make some posts for you.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
And I do know that it's important. So it's something that I know that I need to keep up with. But I feel like finding the right person, it took such a load off, because then it's like I don't have to think about it anymore. And I think that that's a big piece too, is that yes, you have to have enough energy for the uphill pedal. And I still feel like I'm at the uphill pedal. I haven't scaled yet. It's not easy yet. It's not just on coast. But it's getting there, and it's come very far from where it was. So I would hope that anybody that's doing it, you can't just jump ship with whatever you have going on, but there are very small things you can do in between. And if it's what you really want to do, then the patience and the years won't matter, because once you get there, and there is no there.
Yeah,
you get closer to it, but there is no there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to do the math. I'm trying to do the math here on my notepad of because you had done 2 master classes. You were in Miami and Austin, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I was like, Miami was 2018, I think. And then Austin was 2019.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So because I'm just trying to do the math, because you said it's like 5 years and now you're ready to scale, but at year 3, it started to gel for you. So in 2018, that was the first time you invested in our live event, our masterclass. And what I like is that you didn't just slap it on your credit card, show up, and then let it kind of float away. You invested, you hung on to it, you did the work, you came back for a second one, invested again, did the work. You really were very intentional about making this happen. And you have to be. So we don't want people to think, oh, if I just kind of float around randomly for 3 years, suddenly at the 3-year mark, it's going to be. No, you have to be intentional about everything that you do, even in the early days when you're in that grind. Be intentional about the grind, be intentional about doing the stuff that you don't like, because if you are, then pretty consistently at year 3, it starts to click. Yeah. And that seems like a long ways away when you're at ground zero, oh my gosh, 3 years, but the time's going to go by anyway, folks.
Yeah, it goes by fast, Yeah. And you can kind of speak to this, but I found it's not like year 1, I made 0 money.
No.
I made some, and I learned a lot. And then year 2, I made more than I made in year 1. And guess what? All the effort I put into year 1, I can now repurpose into year 2 with it, maybe, but refining that message, because you learn a lot after year 1 about really what your message is, who your target audience really is. You might change your mind. What you thought of your vision as far as where you're headed, that might change. Right. And it can really change. I had a definite idea as to what I thought I wanted until I really kind of figured out this whole, I really need to focus on one person. I need to focus on a niche market. Because what I was doing before, the other thing I was doing wrong, which was just throwing a bunch of information out there to see how it stuck. That didn't work. I did get people that asked questions, but no one that really hired me because they didn't even really know what I did. Right. Then there were some people that were interested enough that asked me more about what I did and gave me an opportunity to. So rather than throwing a bunch of stuff up on the wall or out onto social media and hoping somebody finds it interesting enough to reach out to me, why don't we pinpoint that to begin with? So you learn a lot of stuff in year 1 and year 2 about kind of what really works. And then there's something to, like you said, in year 3 where things really gel, your message is much clearer. People have figured out who you are. You don't seem so new at this anymore. You've helped some people along the way. And to your point, you're not coasting, but the steepness of the climb it's not as steep. You're still climbing, but it's not nearly as exhausting. And you can start to see the top. Yeah.
It's much easier. And I don't know if that's just that there's something to challenge that makes it makes you stronger. So I don't know if it's just that you're increasing strength or if things are indeed really getting easier. I think it's just perception.
Yeah.
Practicing.
And when you're starting out, find as many business owners as you can and talk to them. And it's funny because they will all over and over again kind of say the same thing. And it's just, can you maintain a good mindset while you're in the midst of challenge? Because that's going to be where the determining factor of whether or not you will stop.
Awesome.
And it's been an amazing journey so far. I'm certainly not where I want to be yet, but I'm getting there. And it's it's been an amazing learning process on the way. So
yeah. And I guess, I mean, with that mindset that you just kind of touched on, I mean, there has to be a sense of optimism or belief. Like, it's not where I want it to be, but I'm laying the bricks and I'm in charge. Like we're in charge, right? If I want it to be this, I've got to build it up to that. And I know I can. It's just a sense of like an inner knowing, like I can do it. And you have to go through that work in the trenches. I always think about the first few years, like if the icon of the first few years of building a business, as far as I'm concerned, it would be the image of like a waste paper basket with a bunch of crumpled up balls of paper sort of scattered around it, because it's like, no, that didn't work. No, that didn't work. And then over time, you have fewer and fewer little crumpled up balls of paper. And the things that you do take on, they stack up. I'm using a lot of mixed metaphors here. Waste paper basket, brick wall. You're following me though. So I just think your attitude, like, I guess what I'm getting at is like your attitude, your mind, it's the growth mindset. You are somebody who has a growth mindset and embodies a growth mindset. Anybody who is maybe listening and saying, well, I don't have a growth mindset. Well, you can have one. You can develop one. It's possible. I think it's a lot of the times relinquishing or suspending your beliefs around, I don't know, work and hustle and struggle and things like that. But
well, that's the thing too, is that any job that you are at, you will have to perform. Yeah. If you're working for somebody, you still have to either hit your numbers, meet your mark, whatever it is. Or do you want to do that there, or do you want to go do that for yourself?
Exactly.
And it's just a matter of shifting over and applying some of that energy to yourself and knowing that, yes, it's going to be a little bit longer days and some interesting happenings over the 3 years, but it's doable.
This reminds me of a conversation I just had with a friend of mine who, I'll keep this really short, but one of my good girlfriends is also an entrepreneur kind of in the fitness space. So she and I will get together sometimes and work beside each other. We'll just sit near each other and work, like with our masks on and work. We're not working on the same things, but we're working near each other because we just like that energy. And so we have this circle of friend group text going on. And so she and I will sometimes pop into the group text and say, hey, you want to meet up at the co-working space and we'll just work for a few hours. And one of my other girlfriends says, you guys are working on Sunday? And we're like, yeah, we kind of work every day, actually a little bit every day. Mm-hmm. And my girlfriend, she has a great job, full-time 9-to-5 job working for the utility company. She's never had the urge to start her own business. For her, it's completely foreign. Like, no, you go to work Monday to Friday and then you get Saturday and Sunday off. And it's like, no, that's okay though. That's okay though, because none of us wants to work for the man anymore. We both did. We don't want to anymore. That she wants to is completely fine. But like, I love your analogy of like, you're working for somebody, right?
Right.
So my girlfriend, Allie, she gets to go to work and get a paycheck and she gets Saturday and Sunday off. Me and Tash, we don't get Saturday and Sunday off, but we don't have to work for somebody else. And either way, like, you're still busting your butt for somebody, and you can decide if you want to do it for yourself or for somebody else.
I have a question for you, Michelle, like, because this is something that I think a lot of coaches and just practitioners in general struggle with, is how you view yourself as an entrepreneur or a business owner relative to the actual practitioner. because they're two totally different
Oh,
things.
yeah, they are. Um, I so I'm I'm a much better clinician than I am a business person.
Mhm.
And that's my favorite hat is clinician. Um, so it was funny because the business tools actually came with the Primal Health Coaching Institute because it did not come with acupuncture school. So all of those like little modules and like, okay, find your why, find your vision statement, find and laying out basic things like laying out a plan was something that I did not initially know how to do, even though it's like, yes, I'd made it through college. Yes, I'd made it through acupuncture school. It was like, I had, okay, in my head, it was always, oh, I want to go do this thing. I'm going to go do it. But with the business side of it, I didn't know how to do any of that. And it wasn't like I could go back to business school after acupuncture school. So it became very much, how am I going to do this? And I had run into a business coach earlier on, and it was helpful. Um, but that was just the thing, is that I knew I needed help. So that was, I had first got the idea of, okay, well, this is how you appropriately plan.
Yeah.
And then with that came, all right, this is how I'm going to do my practice, but I still didn't have the language that I needed to make it successful. And that came with Primal Health Coaching Institute, and just basics of knowing how to lay out a plan, and then like getting the marketing materials, asking for resources and help for the marketing materials, and making it mine so that I could then go in and convey this message and be heard. That was it. It was not rocket science. It was like, all right, there's these little things that are missing that if you can just pick up along the way, and then implement them, it's not that hard. It's a lot of work. It can be tedious up front, but it's completely doable.
Oh my gosh, I love that, because I think everybody listening here could probably relate to you. People come to this not because they want to be a business owner, because they want to be a health coach. And so it's, we're hearing more and more of people like, I want to be a health coach, but I want to work for somebody else. Completely fine. These are opportunities that are coming down the pike more and more. But to Erin's point, you're going to give something up for that. And typically what you're going to give up is income potential, typically, but also autonomy. Many of the times when you go to work for somebody else, you are going to have to use somebody else's program. It's going to be rare where an employer will hire you and give you free reign to go run your own program and do things your own way. You're probably likely to find that more common in a smaller business. Like you said, where there's functional medicine practitioners, acupuncturists, chiropractors, they don't have the time to do that stuff. So they're hiring you to take care of it. So you may find more success that way. But I think there's so many people that relate to, hey, I'm a much better coach or a much better practitioner than I am an entrepreneur. But the fact that you could leverage what resources we did give you to give you a starting place, so you didn't feel so lost, and give you some structure. But at the end of the day, you're the one who had to follow through on it, right? You're the one who had to use Ryan's term, get shit live. That was actually what he said, right?
I didn't know I was about to swear on the podcast, so I was refraining. But yeah, it was essentially, all right, okay, so just go do it. Just go do it. Go do it. Like, pick something and start. No more whining, no more moaning. Just do it. Just start.
Yeah.
And it did. I look back on it, and I'm so happy I had the autonomy, because I don't know if many places I could have brought my child to work. And since it's my office, he has his own lounge chair and his own little cubby hole with a refrigerator and and Wi-Fi, so I can work and he can do his lessons. But it's not something that I could not have taken him with me to work during all of this. Like, I can't imagine. It was. They're not. I'm in Hallandale today, so I'm like looking over my shoulder, going, "Where's my boss?" In Hallandale, thankfully they're a little more family friendly, but it was like, I had to get creative with my son during this whole time. So I have a friend that's homeschooling him the couple days a week that I'm in Hallandale. And she's taken over his curriculum and making sure that's solid. Wow. So that when I'm in plantation and he has to be at the office with me, there's already a set thing for him to do. And like that, I couldn't have survived this without that sort of autonomy. Right. It's like, because my former spouse still has to go to work in the medical industry, and it's not like he can bring Caden to work with him. Mm-hmm. It's like, so it afforded me the ability to continue working and to not have it really stand in the way of my income potential, because I had already initially, when I set out, I wasn't thinking pandemic, nobody was, but I just wanted an office space that would be comfortable for my child. Mm-hmm. Like they have sick days, and it's like you can't always call in sick, but if they have a headache, you can bring them and let them be in a lounge chair with a blanket and still tend to them. So it really afforded me the space to be a working mom and still have some autonomy and not worried about getting fired.
Yeah. So it's like, it's well worth the tedium and the struggle in the beginning. And that's just for anybody who's getting started right now. Yes, it's super tedious and super struggly in the beginning. It virtually always is worth it. And so, yeah, none of us suspected, maybe some people did, that a global pandemic would really just like, slam the brakes on the workforce as we know it, but like my business was pandemic proof. Anybody who's in private practice, kind of doing their own thing was kind of pandemic proof to a certain extent. I think it's because we've got this time freedom and we've established some time freedom. So like, or this autonomy, like you said, or whether it's an environmental thing that we were able to kind of extract ourselves from somebody else's rules and paradigms, and we can do our own thing. So whether or not another pandemic comes down the line, years from now, who cares? But what if you imagine that could happen? Like almost start setting up your practice, your business now with the idea that something like this could happen again, or just with the desire to have the absolute flexibility that you have. That's my favorite part about it. And that's why, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to go into private practice, because I was tired of working for other people. I was tired of doing other people's work for them, getting paid to do somebody else's work in somebody else's office, somebody else's dress code. Honestly, the dress code was a bigger factor that I could even probably articulate. But like, there's so much freedom, but you got to work for it. You got to work for your freedom. Yeah, it pays off though.
Amen.
I have a teenage daughter, and I remember this too during the first master class. Thank you, Laura, because yes, all teenagers are assholes.
Oh yes.
So she's just now getting to this space where she's trying to figure out what she wants to do. And I'm really grateful that I started what I did when I did, because she's seeing me do it.
Yeah.
And because I think they get sent into school and there's all these ideas about, well, in order to earn good money, you have to be a blah, blah, or blah. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't want to sit at a desk all day. I don't want to, I'm like, nobody's saying that you have to. It's like, use some of what you've learned, like knowing that you can make it through an obstacle. And part of these younger years are go figure out what you want to do before you have major obligations. Right. So for her, she's still in that space where it was just been funny watching her develop. And
oh my gosh, but it can be painful.
Knowing that she's getting a little of what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And every now and then she'll let me know that she secretly respects me for what I'm doing. So it's been quite helpful to do this little project and have her watch and let her know that it's okay to dream, and it's okay to be something other than what these very stable careers are that are laid out that you think is the only way to earn a living.
Right.
So it's like
absolutely.
a little creativity.
It's funny because, again, in my role here as an admission, I do get people that ask a lot about, following this path versus going to school to get a degree of some kind. And my response is always, look, I think education in general is never something I've ever regretted. But at the end of the day, you really need to sit down and think about what resources do you need to be successful?
Yep.
This is my question every single time. What resources do you think you need to be successful? Sometimes they don't always know. They've got a general idea. And the thing with college is it provides you with an education. Yes. Absolutely. Sometimes they provide experience, right, through internships and things like that. Some schools do have like a career center, right, yep, where you can go and that kind of stuff. But time and time again, when I talk to people who have a degree in all this stuff, say something very similar to what you said, which was, it did not prepare me for an actual career. Like I learned a lot, you know, but how to actually build a business, unless I went to business school, and even then a lot of that's theory, you know. There are some programs now that actually teach entrepreneurship, like that's a degree, not very many, but you know, my thought along these lines is with the cost of college these days, these schools are going to have to do a better job of actually preparing these kids to get out and actually earn a living, whether it's working for themselves or working for somebody else. And there's a lot of certificate programs out there that don't teach what we teach along these lines. They're just educational entities. They're going to teach you what you need to know about health or teach you what you need to know about coaching, but actually to teach you how to actually be a health coach, just embody that presence, be it, present yourself that way, and actually grow a business. They kind of leave that to somebody else. And you know what? Some people kind of need to take it a step further, even coming out of our program, because resources alone for some people are not enough. They do need a kick in the pants, you know? They need, but, and you got, I think you got that with our masterclass to a certain degree, right?
I sure did. And it was funny because I didn't know what to expect for the first class, and it was like I told you, I'm an extreme introvert. I don't particularly like crowds of more than 3. It's painful to speak in front of people, and it's really kind of funny because the other draw in there was like, ooh, paddleboarding with my food guru. Sure, like absolutely. And then that story kind of gets funnier because I was juggling a bunch of things and I didn't have time to like go buy a one-piece bathing suit to go like paddling with professionals, and I forgot like my bathing suit top or something, and Cheryl was kind enough. She looked at me and she's like, "You're mortified, aren't you?" Like, yes, I am. And she went ahead and got rid of her cover too, just for me. She's like, "Fine, I'm doing this just for you, sister." It's like, thank you.
Oh
like I can be embarrassed with a buddy.
That's awesome. For those of you listening, at one of our master classes, we had an activity where we all got together as a class. Those who wanted to got to go out and go paddleboarding with our founder, Mark Sisson. And I got to tell you, people, this is what the value of whether it's a master class or a mastermind, right? Or some sort of like professional group support system is tremendous, is stories like that, right? Where you're pulling for each other to help each other succeed. And there's strength in numbers and people can find their confidence there. You know, I think that comes, you know, until you really have the confidence in yourself, you can borrow from the confidence of the group, right? Or for somebody else to help you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was just, Erin, I can't thank you guys enough for helping me with that marketing packet, because it really, it saved my tush when it came down to having a deadline and having that material ready. It helped get my foot in the door, and I could not have done that without that program. And then the master class just helped hone in on everything.
Well, the thing is with that is that, first of all, like I said earlier, you asked. So that's step number 1. Like, what's the worst that can happen if you ask somebody to mentor you or look something over, or what's the worst that can happen if you run an idea past somebody? They ignore it. They say no. At least you tried. The second thing is, for me, it's like, I get a lot of questions from people like, how do I get started? Or where do I find clients? And it's like, you're going to need to give me something more specific, because like that's such a nebulously vague question. And what you had, Michelle, was something very specific. I'm approaching the DOJ. This is what they want. This is kind of what I'm up against. this is what I've put together. And so it was just clear. So it's like, great. You're actually doing shit, and you're asking a mentor to help you finesse it. You're not asking somebody to tell you what to do. You're doing it, and you just needed a little bit of help. I'm all over that. But if somebody comes to me and like, okay, now what do I do? So I graduated, now what? Where's all my clients? It's like, you're going to have to do some work yourself. You're going to have to. As we've talked about this entire conversation, there's so much value in going and being in the trenches and putting in that work. And so anyway, that's why we were able to help you with that pitch, because you had already formulated it. It was already 75% of the way there or more. That's just, I mean, the moral of the story is, guys, do the work.
Yeah.
Talk to people, ask for favors, ask for help. Be really intentional about your health coaching journey, and it pays off.
It's like, it doesn't have to be, because I think I was intimidated with all the need to be very good with social media or this or that. And it turned out for me that I just needed to go meet people in my area, and the social media will eventually come, because I've hired somebody that likes to do that.
But that's a 2.0 project for you, right? I mean, you can grow. I did not grow my business. I still don't really grow I'm working on it, the whole social media thing. But, I did everything pretty much in person, as far as just meeting people and making connections and offering to help. The idea of getting stuff live is really just as simple as answering a couple of questions, offering something of value and offering to help. And the next thing you know, you become somebody else's valued resource. All comes down to resources, right?
Say hopefully so. And it was a little intimidating, because you go back and you scroll through the names, like, oh, like all these big people have been on there, and I'm like, goodness. But I think it's encouraging to hear somebody that's kind of at the beginning, because you have to start somewhere, and eventually, like, who knows what it will become, but it will be nothing if you don't start. So
exactly.
just start, ask for help. No, it's not going to be like a huge wage up front. It might be hardly anything, or just enough to pay for your certification or whatever it is. But give it some time and patience, and eventually be a little like what I'm doing down here. I'm like, now what do I do?
Now I have to scale. Yeah. Now I have to scale my business.
Oh darn. Yeah, good problem to have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a great conversation. I love these conversations. Super like in the trench, kind of boots on the ground, military metaphors abound. Like, I'd love to have more conversations of practicing health coaches at various stages in their practice, because health coaching is still relatively new. So anybody who's at year 5 is kind of like, you were kind of an early adopter in a manner of speaking, So grateful to have you here telling your story, Michelle. It's awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So how can people that might want to ask you questions or connect with you in some way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I have a website. It's eco-acupuncture.com. All my information is on there, and email address is ecoacupuncture@gmail.com. And I'm happy to help.
Awesome. We love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.
Well, if you've been listening at Health Coach Radio, you'll know that we're all about raising the voices of practicing health, fitness, and nutrition coaches, but most importantly, helping to further legitimize this exploding industry.
Erin and I have disclosed often that we're on the faculty of the Primal Health Coach Institute, founded by none other than the health and wellness legend Mark Sisson. And we've interviewed dozens of guests from just about every different health coaching program you can think of, and who practice in just about any conceivable way you can think of. But our allegiance is to the health coaching industry in its totality, first and foremost. It's our desire to continuously and unapologetically lift and promote this industry that nudged us to create this podcast for you in the first place. It's this same yearning that encouraged us to take the educational offering at our health coaching school to the next level. We are so proud to offer the Primal Health Coach Level 2 certification course, which, when combined with our primary course, the Primal Health Coach certification course, not only satisfies the educational requirements to sit for the board exam, but is specifically designed to teach advanced coaching mastery. You will work closely with a small class of peers through this 12-week, very intensive, live online classroom experience to learn how to execute a coaching relationship that is truly transformational. You'll learn and practice how to ask powerful questions, what it means to hold space for your clients, but most importantly, how to actually do it. You'll learn about the craft of motivational interviewing and the nuances of habit change, goal setting, and accountability, and how to nurture your client's own inner knowing, their intuition, and their own self-efficacy, so that they will graduate from your care a truly transformed person. You want a big, successful, powerful coaching practice. And maybe you're devouring our episodes looking for the silver bullet that's going to launch your business into the upper echelons. We've said it a million times and we'll say it again. Your coaching skills are what will make or break you and set you apart for success in this field. So if you're looking to level up your coaching skills and maybe dial up your credential and become a board-eligible health coach, look no further. You can learn more about PHCI's Level 2 program at primalhealthcoach.com/level 2. But if you would value talking to a real person about your path to being a masterful coach and perhaps a board certified coach, book some time with me personally. You can access my calendar at primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or just call me. You can reach me at 844-307-7662. Thank you for listening to Health Coach Radio, and I hope I get to talk to you soon.